I'm Manoj. I
Yeah.
have. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So I have very targeted question. Um, mm, we thank you everyone for giving this insight on budget. We know like the countries run by Rajapaksa and run. We can't. They've been running this for 30 years. We can't expect something good for people from them because we didn't get anything thus far. So the one question I have is both the speakers, the key speakers, talking about the bad about prioritizing. you know um so what I believe is whoever the next government, because we know we can't do anything about this budget, they have majority, they will get accepted for this and they will execute. But whoever the next, the people we are selecting, isn't that this prioritization is good thing? Because the both speakers told about bad about prioritizing, because this is a burden. And should the government run these business, petroleum, electricity, and telecommunication and airline, should government focus on these things, not this government, the new government we select, because these are services. you know Anybody can run this in profitable way. So if there is a monopolization, we can bring in another supplier. Telecom, we have SLT. If they are not doing well after privatizing, whatever the next government we select, they invite for new supplier from a different country who can do better than this, and then we can introduce competition, and they will then come to a certain standard, the international, and the electricity, and the petroleum. Why you guys are really putting this as a bad thing? Because whole budget is a bad, but we can't do anything, right? We can't vote, we can't reject. We just have to accept whatever the best thing we can do. We can just do picketing, and the Vikram Singh at all, that is not also possible, and he's going to whatever use any power to bring down them. you know what I think is pie rising is a good thing. And if they are doing now, we should, let that go, and, let that happen. So when we select the next government, at least that burden is gone away. So yeah, that's my only question. I want to know, why the key speakers, why you guys are, discourage, tell bad about, prioritizing these, key services, because what I believe is that is not the government prioritization. That should not be, right? We should focus on, the bring more revenue, and, the generate the foreign income, and, improve economy. But, these services, let them, 100% prioritize. And if there is inefficiency in this organization, let these private organization handle this. Now the problem is all the ministers and all that, they just bring in their people into this organization. Even JV, whatever these other third and fourth the parties, they bring their all things into the unions and all that in this organization, and it's still they are inefficient. Yes, thank you. That's the only question I had.
Yeah. Dhanusha.
Do you want
Can you?
me to, or Sumati, would you like to answer? Or
Yeah.
I will answer something on related to education. So if you want to go ahead, I want to say something about education and health.
okay, I'll touch on then.
Actually, we can escape. I especially mentioned about the petroleum, telecom,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
the airlines.
and public investment, public services in general. So now what we have to see is now what has caused this economic crash. Is it because government is running these particular services? And I would also like to contest the idea that that there is a monopoly in telecommunication, because as everybody knows, there are so many telecommunication suppliers already in the private sector. So we can't. It's more of like an oligopolistic system, ballistic system, and also if we take the SLT per se, it's half owned by the private sector itself. And more importantly, SLT has been making a tremendous amount of profits and have been contributing to government revenue. Okay, so now if you privatize those, I'm just talking in terms of finance, I'll touch on the economic aspects also. So if you just focus on that, so if you privatize that, uh, one thing is that uh, government is saying by privatizing these institutions, they are hoping to get around 3 billion US dollars. Right now, as we were trying to explain, as I was trying to explain earlier in the presentation, the whole crisis has been triggered by an outflow of capital through the private sector. I'm not saying that there has been no outflow through fiscal deficit, but as we were highlighting, we have experienced fiscal deficits consecutively of greater than 10%, especially after 1977, but it did not lead to a crisis like this. So that shows that the outflow, and also we showed the numbers that the number of the volume of capital outflow. So the problem is foreign exchange outflowing through the private sector itself. So you are basically handing over the institutions to people who actually created the crisis. So we have to have a critical view of this, the private or market economy, how it functions in countries like this. Now, this is not a problem that is limited to Sri Lanka, as I was highlighting. The experience of Mexico and Argentina, it is a chronic issue in that region in general, and also it is more prevalent in Africa. Now, literature on this is quite vast, although it is not taken into account in Sri Lanka at all by the economists and whoever. If you take the experience of Africa, the outflow is huge through the private sector, through this illicit mechanisms, and even mechanisms that are even called legit. So capital outflow has triggered this. It is the primary cause. What we call it is the tip of the iceberg that people are actually focusing on, like the fiscal deficit and other issues like money printing and so on. I'm not disregarding these issues. So I think I have to also say a little bit about foreign debt also. So that going wasteful public investments by finance through foreign debt, now that only accounts for about 20% of the debt we defaulted. The rest of the borrowed funds have been going into strengthening the reserves and meeting the balance of payments deficits. So those foreign exchange that flew in were also utilized by the private sector. Now, this issue of misinvoicing is the gravity of that process in terms of triggering balance of payments and foreign exchange crises is that it not only takes out the foreign exchange that comes in the form of exports, but it also drags out foreign exchange that comes in the form of foreign debt. So that volume of foreign exchange is not owned by the private sector, but through these mechanisms, they are able to purchase foreign exchange. I won't go into explaining how that happens because it will take a lot of time. So that even the foreign debt crisis of the government is the private sector is largely accountable for that, because now, for instance, the previous Auditor General Gamini Veerasinghe, if I got the name right, he said that there are no corresponding assets within the country relative to the foreign debt that we have incurred. So this is the main reason. That is that foreign debt now is being used for supporting balance of payments issues, and that foreign debt is not leaving any trace in the form of assets here, but is being transferred out through these mechanisms, especially over invoicing of imports. Right? So through these mechanisms, foreign exchange has been flowing out. Now, how much are they going to earn by selling these assets? It's just 3 billion. Our foreign, we have defaulted on 51 billion. And how are we going to solve that issue? The main foreign exchange crisis through privatizing, and privatizing Sri Lanka Telecom is basically leading to, it is worsening the fiscal gap. It is not improving the fiscal position, because then you will be losing the long-term flow of foreign revenue through SLT. So for now, this year alone, for the first 9 months, SLT has paid dividends of rupees 4 billion to the government, uh, disregarding the taxes which they have paid. So then once you sell it off at this point in time, we will have to sell it off at dirt cheap prices. So after private sector has ran our economy to its knees, now as a solution they are trying to sell off state assets. So when you sell off state assets, they will be sold at dirt cheap prices. If you take the stock market now, yes, you see SLT is trading there. So the entire market is crashing. So we'll have whoever who is purchasing will be purchasing at those prices. So the state losses will be magnified, will be amplified through this policy. And then if we look at what we call Ceylon Petroleum, now, yes, I mean, I don't know about how much corruption and all that wasteful spending has led to its the fairly large accumulation of debt there. But then on the other hand, what we also need to see is that now there are things called public goods, and certain goods, if you allow that the market to reflect their supply price, it will, increase the cost of production of the entire system. So, but there are areas of the economy where that effect is not present. So the idea is that these type of public goods, you can basically not allow the market prices to entirely reflect the price, but you tax those unproductive sectors and transfer that tax income, so that these type of goods are being, the supply price of these type of goods are a bit lower or significantly lower than the market price. So the rest of the economy will benefit. Now, for instance, the export sector would benefit by lower costs of fuel, by being able to compete in the world market in terms of its price. And then you have the idea of, again, the public goods. Now, I will also say a little bit about education. Sumati will, I think, touch on that even
We're
more.
running out of time, no?
Yeah, yes, little time.
All right,
Any
okay.
question?
Then, yes, I would just stop there.
I just want to say very little I actually wanted to say something more, but I mean, the corporate sector runs on corruption. We just don't understand it as corruption. So it strikes, and these are this is what is called maybe legitimized corruption, like land is leased to the corporate sector or on a very low fee. And this kind of corrupt practices are what kind of make them run, and labor cost. So what is going to, in privatizing telecom and other, what is this product? What are these production for? Ultimately, they are for the people, right? So, I mean, they are about the workers. What is their what is their wealth? I mean, their health, their wealth, their mental peace. All of that has to be built into any kind of functioning industry. So when we privatize, we are taking that out of the equation, and I think that's the problem. And in privatizing telecom, I'm kind of trying to think about why are we doing this at this point? Is it part of a series of privatizing moves, or is it to kind of set labor apart from profits? Because in a government industry, in a state-owned industry, the workers have a share in so many ways in the profit, or they should. They will ask for it, they will struggle for it, but not so in the private sector. And running in this budget, there was a clear message about how employer has to be protected, not the employer. When it comes to education, what we have seen is, and very sadly, unfortunately, people don't realize this, that the government is funding, sponsoring private education. I mean, even this giving scholarships or giving these vouchers. I mean, I think there was a move at one time to give vouchers to students to study in private enterprises. And this is not Harvard or MIT or something like that. These are like struggling private educational moves, institutes. And the government is funding them by giving them land and subsidizing. And so, I mean, there is this is actually corruption. But we kind of look at, because when we think that when you privatize, the burden is taken away from the government. No, it is not. I mean, that's what we have to look at, because it's built into the system, the corporate sector, how the corporate system runs, that we don't see it as corruption. So I think we have to be very careful in saying that, I mean, privatizing would take the load off, the burden off the government, and it doesn't. And also we have to think very carefully about the welfare of the workers there. And I think that is a primary concern. If and then say, look at something like CEB. I mean, our prices, even without privatization, or the tariff has gone up, right? Think about what we are going to do, what you and I will do, if it triples.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Hasanta, can you raise the question, please?
Yes, my questions are already in the chat box.
Yeah.
Very, very basic. The first question is, yes, there are market failures and we don't have a productive economy. That's very true. But then my question is, what is the promising option? Was the state sector were more efficient or effective, or is even worse? That is one point.
Yeah.
Could I just very quickly say, very, very, very quickly, I think we should have worked a lot more on local production and protecting that. And our impetus went into foreign markets. The migrant workers, garments, and export crops, and in the last 10 years or so, and I think when you don't have the kind of internal stability, the export market is not sufficient to hold a country together economically.
Sorry, I couldn't get it as an answer to my question.
Can I add to that? Yeah. So your question was, now you agree the fact that the private sector has not been investing in what we call the productive sector, or now in any economy, for it to prosper, it should have savings, and those savings should be going into the productive sector, the capital goods sector. Capital goods sector that is providing which is supporting the output of the essential goods. Say, for instance, agriculture. Agriculture needs certain agrochemicals, certain machinery. I'm just taking examples. Say the healthcare sector. So it needs its own chemical goods. So the medical equipment, from there to the medical medicines and all sorts of. There's tremendous range of goods that can be produced. Nothing is being produced here through the private sector. So as you correctly mentioned, now what is the solution? I mean, what is the problem? So obviously, if the private sector is not going into those areas which is essential for an economy, for the public to benefit from the economy, as Sumati was basically trying to raise the point, whether the economy is actually only catering to an elite group, or whether it is basically trying to fulfill the requirements of the general public. So if it's not happening through the public sector, obviously you have to, it is the state sector's responsibility to move into those areas. So in my presentation, I was talking about transferring these unproductive assets that have been accumulated in the private sector within the economy and also outside the economy, like the outflow of capital. We need to retransfer or repatriate that capital in order to engineer an economic plan and also transform those unproductive assets into a tradable form, especially apartments. So I cannot talk about the methodology. Methodology would be a bit more complicated, but the general idea is that those unproductive assets in the form of, that, you are consuming, investing, and basically speculative form of assets needs to be converted into a tradable form and then converted into foreign exchange. Now that we cannot expect the private sector or the market mechanism to achieve that. So definitely the state should interfere and the state should have a clear plan. Obviously, we don't see any governments or political parties having such a plan. I think that is the worst crisis we are having, rather than the economic crisis. The crisis in the policy and approach to the economy itself is a far greater calamity. So yes, it is the government that should basically focus on that. And just to one more point quickly about the previous question on the CPETCO. Now CPETCO's loss was greatly magnified by the collapse of the rupee. Now even the IMF was saying the market equilibrium rate of our currency was to depreciate it by about 17 to 20%, not by 80%. Now, because of these mechanisms of capital outflow in the private sector, that only led to the crash of the exchange rate to this extent for about 80%. Now, that particular 20% was calculated by the IMF, taking into account fiscal deficit, inflation, money printing, and all that type of thing. So even after that, this crashed 4 times or 4 to 5 times greater than that. So the loss in these state institutions was also triggered by other mechanisms that are happening in the private sector. So we need to appreciate this currency to bring down the prices, and for that we need to bring in those capital that actually left the country, and also transform the unproductive assets into foreign exchange and channel them into productive sector. That is the role of the state, the major role of the state that we are seeing as a challenge that we are facing right now. So of course, it's the state's responsibility, not of the private sector. It has failed the entire economy.
Next, Mr. Amal, can you raise the question, please?
Thank you, sir. First of all, Dr. Patirana and Professor Sivamohan, thank you very much for your very informative presentation. So my straight question is to Dr. Patirana. So because of the time is running, I am very quickly asking the question. Now, in this budget proposal, we have not seen any price support scheme for input supply in agriculture inputs. Because I am an agriculturist. For example, fertilizer or agrochemicals, no any price support scheme, subsidy scheme or whatever. Because, so what do you think? What are the policy directives should be included in this for this under this economic crisis situation? So what are the policy directives to be incorporated in this budget proposal to come out from this food crisis, right? So I need simple answers from Dr. Patirana. Did you get my point?
Yes, so your question is how to revive the agriculture sector and what the budget has proposed on that. First of all, I'm not, I don't have a PhD, so I'm not doctor. So, now, yes, now, first of all, I would like to highlight now, for instance, a company like CIC has been making tremendous increase in their profits. So they have the private sector, especially the crisis in the agriculture, they have been exploiting this crisis to their own advantage at the expense of the entire or rest of the entire economy. So now, for instance, now cost of bringing down 50 kilogram sack of urea, I got to know is about 10,000 rupees now after the currency crashed and there was an increase in work market.
24,000.
Yes, now the market price is that 24 or whatever. Now it went up to about 40,000 also about few months ago. But the cost of bringing it down, because I got some info from the suppliers also, they were ready to supply even after keeping a certain amount of good margin, they were ready to supply at 11,000 rupees. So if you see the market price, it went up to 40,000 and now, as you say, it's 24,000. So it's the profits they are reaping out of this crisis is huge. And I mean, people won't imagine that a company or a group of people can be so cynical and have no empathy towards rest of the economy and the country at large. So obviously we need to bring in controls first of all to bring down this mafia in supplying agrarian inputs, including agrochemicals, and also probably it's happening in the field of supplying machinery. So of course in the budget there's nothing of that sort. There is no program to revive the agricultural sector, which is essential right now because people are of course suffering. So we need a program first of all to start. So the revival of agricultural sector must be integrated with the revival of a plan to industrialize. So as we were writing a statement to the central bank and to the press also today, so that I need to reiterate this point. This outflow of capital must be retransferred into these areas, and that cannot be done through the private sector. Or maybe you can go into certain partnerships with them that you have to explore whether that is possible, whether they are interested, because right now these companies are doing it. They are bringing down the entire product. They're doing some sort of mixing and then just selling it in the market and reaping massive benefits by doing absolutely nothing. It is not generating employment. It is also leaking our foreign exchange, and they are reaping massive profits out of this. So we need to the state needs to interfere and then try to have a plan to first of all revive the production of agrarian inputs within the country. That will also generate employment and will be a good answer to this employment issue, because the economic structure itself cannot employ our people. That's why we have about 2 million people working abroad. Half of them are working as housemates, earning next to nothing, right? So so the economy cannot sustain the public now. There's a famous theory by a classical economist called Robert Malthus. He said there is a point in the economy where the population growth is exceeding the output growth, and that so at a certain point the economy will not be able to sustain the entire population. Then there will be some sort of a pandemic or absolute chaos. So what we are seeing is that resources have been leaking and flowing out of the country while the population is remaining the same. So, but the resources that are remaining in the economy is absolutely insufficient to sustain them. So that is also leading to a sort of a reverse Malthusian crisis here. So we need to revive the production in these sectors. It is undisputable, and that has to be led by the state. Of course, we cannot expect these type of governments what we are having, neoliberal governments that are colluding with the corrupted business elite. So the political elite and the business elite are colluded. So which they are largely representing their interests, the state. So we need a state that basically represents people's interests, not the interest of the business elite. That is the major issue we are having.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Dhansha. Next, Mr. Rajesh Kumar, can you hear me? Can you ask the question, please?
So I just want to make two very brief comments, very brief ones, and obviously I would like the speakers to comment on it. One is that this word modernization is a dreadful word. I saw Sumati quote Ranil Wickramasinghe. He keeps saying modernization in several places. This is an attempt with the privatization to completely restructure labor relations and shed lots of jobs. And obviously that goes without saying with privatization. So unions have to be aware about this word modernization. What do they mean? Give new terms and conditions and impose deadly hours of work and all kinds of things. And I think that's what's going to happen, even worse than it is now. The second thing is, of course, what Danushka and Sumati were talking about, the collusion between the capitalist state has always been the broker and the representative of business interests, and which in our country, in Sri Lanka, the whole business class are a parasitic class. As Danushka was saying, I mean, a lot of the problems have started in the private sector. And, this is what on the left is understood as socialism. Socialism is a bogey word. Nobody wants to talk about socialism. But this is socialism for the rich. Yes, we are subsidizing them, supporting them, and they are sponging off of us. And socialism for the rich, and poverty and starvation for the poor. That's what is on order in Sri Lanka.
Danusha, you have mentioned that one of the main reason for this economic crisis is the capital flight, right? So my question is more into political. If economically that's correct, right? So if they say that this is my profit, I can do whatever I want to do with my profit. I will keep my profit in offshore account. How do we count it? What is the point?
Yeah. Now, the main main counter argument there is that this particular form of capital flight is not only taking place through profits. That is the point I was trying to raise. Because now when you do, say, a process like over-invoicing imports, which is absolutely deadly to an economy if it happens to a greater extent. Because through over-invoicing, whoever who is doing it, say the business elite, obviously the business elite, because you need offshore accounts, not only offshore accounts, you need offshore companies to do this. These small timers can't do that type of thing. So they are purchasing the foreign exchange that they did not produce. For an process of over-invoicing to take place in a smoothly, if I may call it, you need a flow of foreign exchange that is in excess of your export incomes. So that is your foreign debt, foreign remittances, and even so-called foreign investments, the dollars that are flowing in, if at all it did flow in. So because through that process, whoever is doing it is capable of purchasing the dollars that are circulating within the banking system, which are not necessarily produced by the locals, or they are not necessarily generated through profits. So that is why I said the foreign debt, there is no comparative volume of assets that are within the economy compared to a foreign debt. The main reason is that there has been an outflow, a massive outflow of foreign exchange through this process that the private sector has nothing to do with producing it. So, I mean, I know maybe this is hard to imagine, but this is what has been happening, and that is why we face this type of a chronic economic crisis where people started. I mean, they were dying on queues. So the massive shortages, entire country was at a standstill. Only this gradual decrease in world market prices in oil, and also the rationing system, which we were lobbying for a rationing system from the beginning, and they only implemented it very recently. That only subdue that problem, but it's still there. Of course, it's still there. So it's not only the profits that are flowing out. It is the wealth of the entire country that is flowing out. And when you say profits, now so say that now we look at the profits. So what is the how unjust that is even to take your profits out, because those profits are being produced by the workers here by using resources here, where within the economy. So just because that volume of profits, say in the market system, the legal system, you are entitled to that as a businessman, but you are not entitled to take that out from the economy. Even the market system respects that law. See, even the market system respects the fact that uh, that flow of profits should be repatriated into the country. That is a common law that all countries are basically respecting, are basically implementing.
Could I ask Lasantana, I think, I mean, profits have to be taxed, right? I mean, that's a very common feature in developed. I think I saw somebody talking about developed countries. In developed countries, taxation is very
after
high.
tax profits. This is after tax profits. Profit after tax, PAT. So no, so they are taking out the profits even after being taxed. So so even that is detrimental, because those profits are produced by using local resources. So they need to be returned, because that income is necessary to do reinvestments in the economy and expand employment. While you are having the access to its ownership within the market system, you need to reinvest it here, because there is a massive, what we call the opportunity cost of this.
But Dhanusha, there's very little taxing of the corporate sector.
Yes, true.
Yeah, so I don't know, like, why we say profits after taxation, because even Ranil Wickremesinghe has recognized that there's that I think IMF and even IMF has recognized that there's our taxation system.
We are trying to address this in general. The idea of, yes, true, that the taxation is low, so they have raised taxes. So, but the problem is there. So then we can ask, so now they have raised taxes on the corporates. Then have we solved the problem?
No. I agree with you. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So in general, the problem is even the profit after tax should be reinvested in the country, because there is a massive opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is the income you lose by not reinvesting those savings or that capital, the volume of capital. Now, for instance, I would like to go now in India. There is a book by a professor. I forget his name now. There is a book on the black economy of India. So he is saying if we take into account the opportunity cost of capital flight in India after the decade of 1970 up to 2010, the Indian economy would be 7 times larger. So these proportions are obviously unimaginable, the opportunity cost of that. So I mean, so that is why
the president in his budget speech, he actually mentioned this the proposed economic model or proposed economic base should focus on taking care of poor and vulnerable groups. But we don't see any program he suggested to make economic justice. Actually, we should use that word economic justice for those oppressed people. And again, Ranil says they will soon present the new legislations and legal amendments to the parliament that are necessary to economic transformation. So I think this is a very serious issue. I want to ask this question both of you. So I think this kind of changes, as I heard, this labor laws and land laws have already planned to change. So this will create a big, I think, big social unrest. So what do you think? Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think Ranil's speech, I don't like to call him the president, his speech, budget speech, was about, not budget speech, I mean a speech a few days ago you come and protest, I will put the military on you. I mean, he's threatening. I mean, he knows that there's going to be unrest. He feels, he can sense it. He knows, he's sharp enough to know that. So I think this is going to be coupled with repression. And by next year, I think people are going to suffer, and I think they will come out again. Because I mean, at one level, after a point, you cannot take it anymore. And I think he's preparing the ground for that, for threatening people.
Danusha, you currently in fixed deposit interest rate is almost touching 30, and some banks are giving 35%. So how do you read that situation? What is the relation to unemployment, aggravated unemployment that you mentioned?
Sorry, Lasant, I couldn't follow. The line was not so clear.
Now the fixed deposit interest rate is almost touching 30%, right?
Yes, yes.
So how do you read that situation? Is that what you have mentioned about aggravated unemployment? How does that relate?
Yes, the interest rates have gone through the roof. I don't get the question. How do you
you mentioned that aggravate inflation versus aggravate unemployment, right? So
no, I mean yes, when our inflation compared to our international trading partners, when our inflation exceeds our trading partners, then the only option there what we have is to allow the currency to depreciate, because then it's a basic theory. If not, our exports become uncompetitive. But then it is again creating the second round effect or second round wave of inflation. So that is leading to higher interest rates, because the value of the currency goes down. So people would put cash in other speculative assets. Then the banks would have no savings. It would lead to a bank run. So then banks have to increase the interest rates, so to keep the savings within the banks, so that banks would survive. In an environment of high inflation, we see interest rates also rising because of that particular phenomenon within the markets. Because mainly to retain the savings or the depositors within the banking system, the bankers will have to raise the interest rates. If not, people will try and go and buy all these assets and hoard the cash in the form of speculative assets. It could be stocks, it could be any type of other goods. Feel like looking to periods of hyperinflation in any other economy, you would see that people buying goods and just hoarding. There were examples from Germany where people were buying empty bottles, right? So that value of empty bottles tend to increase day by day. So just to maintain the value of their savings. So as a counter mechanism, banks raise the interest rates. That's what has happened because of high inflation. Bankers have raised the interest rates. But then again, it will lead to, as you said, unemployment and also underemployment, because investing becomes extremely costly. And also, there is high degree of uncertainty what would happen to your investments. So then people tend to hold. That's another idea of liquidity trap, where people hold on to their cash. They don't invest. Especially now in a country like Sri Lanka, it's a liquidity trap in the foreign exchange market. People try to keep their savings or money in the form of foreign exchange through all these illicit ways. They're trying to buy dollars, not invest. So that is why it is leading to a contraction in employment.
Yes, time is, sorry, the time is going on. Can you answer one of the question raised by Hassan in inbox? Market economy as the mafia economy in Sri Lanka?
We are not in a clear understanding about this market economy. We are just assuming that the present system introduced by J.R. Jayawardena and continuing until today as a market economy. This is not a market economy, this is a mafia economy. In market economy, state has a role to regulate the market, and same time citizens are to be there to influence, support, and sensitize the state and market. So we are in a mafia economy, and we are just understanding this as a market economy. That is one thing. Then regarding IMF, I think we have not yet adopted IMF recommendation. But for last 30 years or so, we have just cheated the IMF also. So we should not blame IMF also. I'm not an IMF man, but still, some of their proposals are worth. But our cheaters, our criminals have not adopted those recommendations. Those are my just.
You are saying the market should be regulated. So yes, exactly.
Yeah. So now, according to your one, what I thought was you are just trying to take us back to the state economy, like 70s or so.
Take us back. No, there were tremendous flaws in that particular form of government, which I don't think we have time to go in. They didn't have a particular form of economic planning. You know, this industrialization is not a process where you start a factory here and there, which is unconnected from each other. An economic plan is an integrated process where you take agriculture and industry together. So now if the private sector is not functioning properly, where if the resources are not channeled into productive sectors through the private sector, even say even within a frame of good regulation, you can't expect the private sector, the regulation would, you know, seal out all these leakages and so on if the current regime is up for it. But that doesn't mean it will automatically retransferred into sectors where, you know, we were being discussed.
Yeah, sure.
The problem
I'm not proposing you to go to Germany, but look at India, look at Thailand, look at Malaysia.
No, there are differences between developed capitalist countries and underdeveloped countries like ours.
No, sorry. I'm not referring to Germany. I'm referring to India.
Much better. I agree with that. So those structures are all developed in a historical process. And if you read into the history of Germany.
No, sorry, my dear. I'm not referring to Germany. I'm referring to India, Thailand, and Malaysia.
No, wait. So I just finished my answer. So we have to take examples from developed countries now. So if we are looking at going there, if that's your desire, so to speak, then you have to look into the history of these countries. Even if you take a history of Asia, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, during the initial process of economic transformation, the state did the economies was run based on a state economic plan. Later on, only after the economic structure was developed to an extent where the resources are flowing into productive sectors, then only the private sector basically got adapted to that. It's not that it automatically, spawned from nowhere, spawned from, without any state intervention. Economic planning was a major component of all these developed countries. There is hardly any country in this world that has industrialized, that has developed capitalistically, if that's what we are going at, without any state planning. So that is what I'm trying to highlight here. So, I mean, it will take more time to explain the history of these countries. But generally, economic development in all the advanced world was initially led and directed based on an economic plan of an integrated plan, not something what we had during the early 70s. Early 70s, we had other issues also. The world was facing a huge food shortage. There was a famine. So the grain prices went skyrocketed, and also there was a much worse fuel crisis, energy crisis, where due to geopolitical issues, where oil prices, I think, increased about 10 to 14 times. Much more higher than the rate of increase what we are witnessing. So that basically crippled countries like ours. So, and also the subjective aspect or the internal deficiencies were there when it comes to capacity of that particular government, the knowledge about the economy. There are so many issues when it comes to our agriculture and the structure of the labor market, which we can't go into right now. Those complexities have to be addressed through economic planning. And then those complexities were not addressed by the 70s left-wing government. And obviously, they were also, as Sumati would agree with me, quite divisive when it comes to the racial ethnic problem. So that also led to collapse of any progressive plans being implemented. So I hope in general I answered.
Yes, thank you.
Huh?
I think time is over. Is there any question? Any question? One question anybody can
No,
ask then.
that's I just want to add this. President's speech, in the budget speech, they use the word social market economy for his model. Just I want to tell that. That's what he
Yeah.
want to say. Social market economy. So
Yeah.
how do you understand this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very interesting that you brought out that point, because we were now, when the Yapalna government came out in 2015, also they brought out this term called social market economy, and we are going for what they're saying is that okay, incomes generated should be distributed, but we lead the private sector, let the private sector do the investing and expansion of incomes. But if you take this idea of social market, it actually generated in Germany, especially now during the Second World War, there was a tremendous amount of state planning in Germany. I would need some time to explain this to, okay, give me about 5 minutes. So there was tremendous amount of state planning, and the outcome was that during the Great Depression, Germany came out even stronger, right? Out of the Great Depression, while the other economies in the region was on its knees. Keynes was also highlighting this point. So Keynes devised an economic plan, basically getting points from what Germans did during the World War. Obviously, it crashed because of Hitler going fanatic. So social market economy does not mean state just distributing incomes and leaving private sector, letting the private sector generating all the or doing all the investments. It involves a greater involvement in the economy, the state involvement into production itself, to basically close out the gaps, close out the structural deficiencies, structural issues in the economy, and the state getting involved in it. Now, even France, basically, now in Western Europe, this form of economic model was implemented after the Second World War, to basically face or come out of the destruction it created. So now they are using this term social market economy, but obviously doing the exact opposite what the Europeans did. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, you all. Dear Professor Sumiti Sivamohan and Mr. Dhanush Patirana, you are appreciated that you have accepted our invitation and deliver informative presentation and share the knowledge and direct us about the economic justice. I think again, on behalf of our organization, we gave our gratitudes for the both of you. And also we thank all the audience in the contribution, the ideas and comments. So today, I think we're happy to say we have done in the good discussion and on current economic crisis. I think you all get knowledge, realize what is going on, what should be done in future. So we hope to do another discussion, so you would be able to join us again. Thank you very much.